Welcome to the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, founder of Expansive CEO and X Squared Wealth Planning. Buckle in as we explore how to create true prosperity and build a business and a life that expands beyond yourself and makes a dent in the universe. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, and my guest today is a woman who has made such incredible shifts in her life. And she's going to tell us all about the different places and different businesses and different experiences she's had that have led her to where she is today, creating a whole new impact. So Kirsty Verity is here with me today. She helps women create impact beyond their limitations by really getting the space that they need to discover their unique genius. And from there, create the business and the life that actually feels good to their soul. And Kirsty, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And yes, absolutely. And tell us, what does that mean? Why does this matter to you to help women get the space they need to build something that actually feels good to their soul?
Yeah, so I guess part of my story is that I was that woman, right, who had had a really successful corporate career, kind of got to this point where I was like, now what? And there's something missing. I think I need something else. And I then started to look into, well, what do I want, right? And so at that point, I started to look online and I was Googling all the lifestyles of the rich and famous and all of these things. And I really happened upon this idea of traveling the world, having a laptop lifestyle, and essentially supporting myself whilst doing that because I love to travel. I'm a Brit. I actually moved to Australia. And then from there, I was like, okay, I still want to keep traveling. That's my passion. And so that's what I did. I ended up creating a business on Amazon, using Amazon as the platform and creating my own brand. And because of my corporate career, which was in corporate marketing, that's the principles I took with me and I started to build this brand. And what the vision board that I kind of put together, which was traveling the world, I was, money falling from the sky. I had a laptop on the beach, fancy cars and stuff. And I'd literally done it within 14 months and I had this 7-figure business. I was traveling the world. And then I met a ton of people, conferences and things like that. And they were like, oh, how did you do it? So I started to help them do it. And then I had other people saying, hey, why don't we create businesses together? So I was kind of flattered actually that they felt like that was something that I could do, right? So I was like, yeah, why not? So I then ended up in all these different business partnerships. So I had my e-commerce business with that was actually an ex-boyfriend that I was in business with, which again wasn't ideal. And then I had these other businesses that I started, and one was a coaching business, which was helping people do the very similar thing to me, and growing a brand and making sure that they could make profit, which I know that you're very, it's very dear to your heart,
Yes.
because it's very easy to start an e-commerce business and start something on Amazon. But the real problem is actually then, of course, making the cash flow and the money to support it and support you. And that was a really big thing for what I wanted to help people with, because it was a really big gap, especially in that industry. And so I did that and it kept going and the money was going up in the bank account. And then it was like, well, now what? I was kind of in the same position as what I was when I was in corporate in my mind.
Mm.
And then I was like, well, what next? I've built this thing, it's 5 million a year. Maybe I should go for 10. Maybe I should go for 20. Maybe I should go for 100 million, right? I hired a billionaire coach who was going to teach me how to get to this 100 million. So I'm going through all the stuff. And as I'm doing it, I'm just writing stuff down, right? I'm just like, you have to write the vision board, you have to write the vision statements and everything. And it wasn't coming from here. It was coming from here.
Mhm.
And the more I thought about it, the more that had to be done to achieve that, the less I wanted it. But I just didn't know how to get out of it. I had businesses with people, teams, business partners. And I just thought, I'm stuck in this. So I just need to keep going. Right.
Mm.
So I kept going, kept building it a bit longer. until really it just got to that point where I was just exhausted. I was apathetic. I just felt empty and I just couldn't do it anymore. And as I started to kind of take that foot off the gas, the worst thing that I felt was going to happen started to happen because the revenues and the profits came down.
Mm.
I just didn't want to do it anymore. I'm thinking about all these people that I have to feed, right? And in the end, I ended up just being like, okay, well, I need something different. There's got to be a better way. There just has to be a better way. And that's when I sought guidance from someone who had actually transformed their life. They'd been in a very similar situation to me, and they looked like they'd transformed. And so I ended up having a conversation with her. And I remember the first line was, I've heard that there's this thing called ease and flow that you can have in your business, but I just don't get it, right? I mean, I kind of had that when I was traveling the world doing my e-com thing. And, I felt really in flow then because I was just doing what I wanted. But then it felt like I couldn't stay there. I had to keep going and growing. But for me at that point, the growth was more to do with the business as opposed to me, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah.
I didn't associate the two things really. Um, and I kind of just, like I said, I just got caught up in this stuff that I needed to do. And so, working with her, I was then able to kind of step back and just really assess what it is that I truly wanted. And it wasn't an easy experience. It sounds very simple, right? Yeah, what do you want? But it actually, when you've got yourself caught up like that, and I see so many women and men as well, but mainly, women, we get caught up in this ideal that we've had this success, and it's so great that we've had this success that we're not allowed to choose a different path
Mhm.
because we've committed to it. That was a big thing for me. I had this commitment pattern, I guess. I've said I'm going to do it, so I'm going to finish it no matter what, right?
Yeah.
It's almost seen as a bad thing if you change your mind. So um, the biggest shift for me was, number one, there was the physical thing of the money coming down in the bank account. And I was just watching it. I couldn't get after it. I was like willing myself. I'm like, come on, just create a program, send the emails, do the social media, just do what you need to do, right? Because you've done it. You know what to do. And I just couldn't do it. I just could not do it. And I had this moment where literally there was nothing left in the bank account.
Mm.
And it was a lot of it was in my head because yes, the bank account was empty. I didn't know at that point where the next thing was going to come from because I wasn't doing anything to generate it. At this point, I'd let go of all the business partners and everything. And I was just like, okay, I need to figure this out. And funnily enough, 2 weeks later, I had a client come through and it was great. But at that moment, it was a real turning point for me. And I was like, okay, I needed to face the fear that I feared the most, which was not having that money, because that was the thing that was driving me to create more, 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 more.
Mm.
So it's almost like a paradox of this is what I felt like I needed to be safe and what I needed to be secure and worthy and all of those things. And then the opposite had to happen for me to face it and say, well, I'm actually all right now, right? Now's the clean slate. Let's do something different. And I'm not suggesting that everybody needs to do that. And that's why I want to help people so that they don't have to get to that point. Because one thing that I found was that the more we listen to that feeling that we have inside of us, which is those niggly things, right? I call it like those little whispers.
Mhm.
When you know that something's not right, but you just put it off, you just kind of quash it down. No, that's stupid. No, I'll have a glass of wine. No, I'll scroll on social media a bit longer and it'll be fine. I'm just being stupid. Those are the things that we need to listen to. And maybe it isn't real, but we still need to look at it anyway, if that makes sense, and get used to looking at it in a way that gives us data. So I
Mm.
really see that I was very shut off from emotion, right? I'd spent a lot of time in a male dominated corporate environment. I mean, I love the guys that I work with, but I actually became very masculine in those corporations to get shit done, right? And that was my mantra. In fact, in my coaching program at that point, after every video, because it was a very, hey, do this and then we'll get this result. And at the end of every video, the call to action is, right, it's time to get shit done, right? It was like, that's how ingrained it was. And so I had to undo a lot of that and to open up to be able to feel. And that felt very foreign for me. But now I use feelings as data. So for the really rational people out there, it's a way to think about it is, yeah, this is actually telling me something, right? It's like if we have a headache and it's continuous, maybe it's time to look at that. Same thing. If I've got an ache in my knee, maybe it's time to look at that. But so many of us, even our bodies, we kind of push through because it'll get better. And so it's not to be self-indulgent, if we want to call it that. It's not to be a victim. It's actually the opposite of that. It's to look at the data to say, what is this trying to tell me? What's a lesson here that I need to kind of look a bit deeper into and understand it a little bit more for myself? And so that's kind of when I hit rock bottom. It was kind of right. The thing I'd been avoiding, which was that, like listening, looking, feeling, crying, letting the emotion out, however it wants to come out. It was actually a catalyst to allow me to do that. I couldn't do anything else. And so by just letting those floodgates open, I was then more able to then just look at it, create more space to look at that. And the more space I created, rather than doing to try and get over something, then the more I felt, the more I saw, the more I listened, the more I journaled, the more I understood what was actually coming from my heart. And it, like I said, it wasn't easy for me because I was so programmed to do stuff, take action. But I actually had to make a commitment to myself to not do that, actually do the polar opposite of that and be like, okay, if this thing is not getting me where I want to go, I have to just do the opposite. Let's start there. And so that's what I did. So I went from really being, like a robot doing stuff to doing nothing and taking that space, listening, journaling, introspective, and then really giving myself permission to just understand what was coming through. And then once I got a little bit further on that journey, I was then more able to actually take action from that. And so that was my next step was, okay, so what is it telling me? What do I need to do next? Not necessarily what do I need to do in 5 years? What do I need to do in 10 years, which is my old way, And so it was the total opposite. Like I said before, I need to hit $1 million. There's the goal. I'm going to work backwards from the goal. And that's my plan. That's what I'm going to do. And so now it's more, what's the guidance? What's the guiding light that I want to live by, which is finding out who I am, the pursuit, I guess, the discovery of who I am without limitation, and using that as my North Star to make decisions, just decisions on what type of things I want to create for people, what impact I want to have, whether I do social media or not, whether I decide that I want to go to conferences and meet people, rather than the logic brain, which was my old way of, I need to be at this, and this. I need to send X amount of emails a day. I need to be following up on the ROI. I need to be looking at how many webinars I'm going to be doing to get the right people in, bums on seats. That was the old way. And so now it's a very spacious and aligned way of creating impact, as opposed to hitting a number target, which is what I used to do. So yeah, that was my experience going through it. And as I went through that, I was like, this is what I want to help people with, because I think I've always been someone who wants to help, right? Who wants to, I see a problem and I'm like, oh, I really want, this is what you could do differently, right? Like I love opening up people to possibility. And that was really my unique genius, right? So that's when I started to look into, well, what do I love to do? And what do I love to do that is, I could just do it all day, every day without even get paid for it. I would just do it
Right.
anyway, right? And that's where I started. And I was like, okay. And then how valuable is that, right, to someone? And then I started to kind of go down that path and then just contacted some people that I knew that I'd worked with previously. Hey, how are you doing? And it just kind of started to move from there as opposed to from my head of where do I need to go? How do I need to target? And all those things, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to jump in and like kind of share that experience with you, that especially the being, in a very masculine dominated space. And we can say male dominated too. I mean, that's technically accurate as well. Um, in both of the more corporate situations, and where
Yeah.
we both were before, financial planning, even the newest numbers from the CFP board are still that less than 24% of CFPs are women, like
Wow.
across the
Mm.
board, and advisors in general, like financial advisors across the board, I think it's less than 20%, um, are women. And so it's a very, that environment is very dominated by the masculine way of doing business, right?
Hmm.
And so that's that same, like, what's your target? How are you going to get there? What's your SMART goal? Like bringing it back, walk it back, right?
Mm.
How do we get there step by step? What's your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan? And I I had such an aversion to that, as well as really, gosh, over the last, no, I wouldn't even say over the last several years. I mean, even I am thinking back to, like, 15 years ago, when I was in this space, right, being asked these questions, like, where do you want to be in 5 years? I knew inherently that I don't actually know.
Hmm.
I don't actually know what things could look like in 5 years, because whatever I put out there, my intuition is that it could be so much different, and it could be so much better than
Right.
anything that I can imagine. And so learned, what I've learned about myself, specifically, is that, if I do put, like, targets out there, if I sit with my vision and I sit with, okay, what feels good to create, if I get some inspiration around, different clients or different programs, or different things, that I might want to build, if I keep it with a very open hand, just what you're saying, like, what's the next step? Not what are the next 14 steps? What's the next step
Hmm.
that I want to take in this progression, and leave the actual outcome open? That's when, like, stuff happens that I'm like, I look backwards and I'm like, couldn't even I couldn't even have put this together to be as beautiful and magnificent as it is right
Mm.
now, other than to say, "Ooh, I have this inspiration," and then follow that each next step.
Right.
And I think what you're getting to as well is that this approach of stillness, taking time for stillness, and this approach of, you know, kind of surrendering to, right? What's actually, so surrender to me, this is what that sounds like to me as well, when you say, I've been doing and doing and doing, like, this has been doing step ABC, 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 ABC over and over again. Okay, what happens if I flip the script and do XYZ?
Hmm.
Because I know what ABC will get me, and it's not what I want.
Right.
So let's surrender. That's another version of surrender, right? Let's surrender ABC and find out what XYZ does instead, and get the data.
Yeah.
Get the data from that. Um, and allow, like, do a lot more allowing rather than forcing
Mm.
all the time. It's kind of what I was hearing a lot from your
Hmm.
story.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I went through that, I wouldn't have said that it was as logical as that to me, right? It was more that I didn't know what else to do. So why not do this instead? Like you said, I'm going to surrender. It wasn't at that point, it wasn't, definitely wasn't a conscious, like I'm surrendering this and I'm moving to this. It was more like, fuck it, I'm just going to do this, right? Because I just don't know what else to do. So I'll do that, right? And but yeah, definitely that's the process, is that idea of I'm I'm going to create space so that I can listen to what is actually here right
Here,
now.
here being your heart,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Listening to your heart over your head over and over again.
Right. So that was really hard for me because I mean, I used to talk about the fact that I felt like I was a big walking head. That's all all my energy was up here, right? Just
Hmm.
is like this body walking around. I mean, I used to do, I mean, I was still do, but I did work out and everything, but it was very more mechanical as
Hmm.
opposed to coming grounded into the body. So when someone asked me, how do you feel your body? I was like, what are you talking about? I've got no idea what you're talking about. So the doing nothing, I guess, or the stillness was, I'm just going to see what's here, meaning, how am I feeling? Do I feel anxious? Do I feel happy? Do I feel nervous? Whatever those feelings are. And then where am I feeling it? And then why am I feeling that? Why do I think I'm feeling that? And then that helped me to really process out a lot of things that, oh, I'm scared of this. I'm worried about that. And another key difference for me, and I'm not saying that everybody needs to do this, but it was a key change for me because I used to be quite a big drinker, right? I drink a lot of wine and partying and all this stuff, right? And it was almost part of my identity. I started in corporate, I continued it through e-commerce and lots of conferences and parties and everything. And I just got to this point where I was just like, I just don't want to do that anymore. And so I stopped drinking. I did it for a short time. Clarity just became so much bigger because not necessarily the alcohol itself, but more like the habit. Oh, I'm stressed, or I'm kind of celebrating, or great, I did that webinar, or oh, I got another client. Let's have a glass of wine, right? But all it did was kind of dull the feelings that I was having.
Yeah.
And then when I stopped doing that, then it became like a lot more open. And then I was like, oh, now I can't ignore these because they're kind of not being quashed. And yeah, that could be done with anything, right?
Oh my gosh. No, the way you just put that though, oh my gosh, uh, like my brain just like assimilated that in a different way because we know this, right? That alcohol in particular is a numbing agent or a
Mm-hmm.
numbing behavior, but it's also, scrolling is a numbing behavior, watching TV, all of that, right? But alcohol in particular literally changes your brain chemistry. But
Yeah.
the way that you just put it that, oh, that was a really tough day, or
Mm-hmm.
oh, I just got a new client. Right. So it's not just like, oh, it's making me feel better because, I'm coming up from the tough experience. It's also dampening the up
Yeah.
experience, right? It's minimizing your ability, your range of emotion.
Absolutely.
And that
Yeah.
like that hadn't again, I knew it, but I didn't hear it in that way before, right? Like when you're thinking about, especially I would think about it on the negative side, right? This was stressful. This is how I unwind. But I
Mm.
hadn't thought about it from the sense of when you're celebrating, when you're happy, that's actually, you're like, cheers. No, that cheers is actually also dampening the high side of your emotional feeling.
Yeah.
It's
It's
bringing the
weird.
rage.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also, so same again, like that was a big part of my identity too. I mean, being in Cincinnati, suburban country, I really, and like truly, I actually enjoyed bourbon, right? It wasn't
Mm.
just like I'm a cool girl that drinks whiskey, right? Like I actually enjoyed it,
Yeah.
and enjoyed the different flavors of and different types and all of that. But especially during, gosh, even before COVID, but especially during COVID, it turned into like every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
like a little bit turned into like, a double instead of just a single every
Mm.
single day. And I was so surprised, truly, when I was like, I think it was maybe about 2 years ago at this point where I was like, "You know what? I don't know." Like, I had been doing so much work to feel my emotions, to get in touch with my body, exactly like you're saying, right? That same process of like, "Okay, I really wanna understand what I'm feeling and get in touch with my emotions." The alcohol stopped being appealing as I was able to get more in touch with my emotions, sit with my tough emotions, especially.
Mm,
I didn't need to numb them, I could feel them, and I would be okay. I wasn't gonna get hurt
mhm,
by feeling my emotions, and the way like, the alcohol consumption started to just naturally drop. I just wasn't interested in it for a while, and then probably about a year ago at this point, it was like, "I'm kinda done." Like, even the celebratory glass of wine or, different, like, I won't say never. I don't feel like it's like I can't ever have that, but I haven't felt any desire
mm.
to
Yeah,
have alcohol, and it's almost mm, yeah, almost a year at this point
yeah,
in
yeah,
time, which, yeah, is such a shift from, again, the culture that just says, this is how you wind down from a stressful day, and this is how you celebrate when good things are happening,
yeah,
is by
absolutely.
numbing the feeling.
Yeah. And for me, it was a really big part of my identity because I was known as not the party girl. Well, when I was younger, I was definitely more like a party girl. And I was always the one who's up late, who's out there with the boys who can drink them under the table, because that's a very British thing. And then I moved to Australia and it's even worse, right? So there's a big culture there. And I enjoyed it. Like you said, it's not that I didn't enjoy it. I did until I then started to not enjoy it. But I still kept going with it. It was the same with the businesses, right? It was that idea of I can't say no because this is who I am,
Mm,
right? They're going to think I'm weird. They're going to think, what's happened to Kirsty? And people have said that to me. They were like, oh my God, I can't believe you stopped drinking. I was like, well, neither can I, to be fair, but I did. Um, but it became like, and actually funny you said about COVID, that was actually a really good time for me because with drinking, because I was definitely more into when I'm in a social situation. And then for me, I was like, great, I don't need to now. Isn't that funny?
mm,
And so then I just stopped. And like you, the more I became more in touch, the less I wanted it. And it just became so normal. And now, yeah, it's been 3 or 4 years and I just don't drink alcohol anymore. So I never thought I would ever say that in any of my life. And I'm totally cool with it. Like, and I'm totally cool with other people drinking. And that's totally fine as well. Just for
right.
me, it's more important that I listen to myself and that I'm replenishing myself and that I'm nourishing myself and that's more important to me than having the glass of wine, which I know is going to do what you just said, like numb the things. And so that's the consciousness that I keep, which, and if we're all here trying to raise our consciousness and raise our vibration, our frequency, or however you want to call it, essentially take ourselves beyond our limitations, then things like that just stop that process or they hinder that process of doing so. So when you have a North Star like that you're really connected to, no matter what it is, that becomes more important than the stuff or the baggage or the illusions that we think are kind of holding us back. All of a sudden, it just becomes more clear.
Mhm,
And that's what I've found is that, and it's totally different for different people, but that is more important than the stuff that we think we can't do or the stuff that we think we should do to hold us back, that holds us
mhm.
back.
Yeah, yeah, that resonates so much, for me and with my own experience too. Again, yeah, that the ability to, like you're saying, it's allowing the quiet. It's allowing quiet within yourself so that you
Yeah,
can get hear or feel or however that comes to you, like actually get in touch with your particular intuition.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, it feels really, when I think about that, when I think about my experience of getting quiet, it really did, um, take on, there was a lot of journaling, there was a lot of it, sometimes I felt the term navel gazing come up and like, is that all I'm ever going to do? Right. Like there were times when I'm like,
Mm.
oh my God, I feel like this is all I'm doing. But it's, it's in service. It's in
Yes.
service to like the broader, like what's coming next. Even though, because
Right.
I think that was probably what you were talking about, right? Like going the complete opposite direction when we get still for long enough that we start to feel squirmy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Just gonna turn
Yeah.
that
Kirsty just has to plug in her computer. So
off.
we don't want to end the interview prematurely just because of a laptop. So good.
Exactly. There we
Yeah.
go.
Perfect.
Um,
But
yeah,
that did remind me of that like the squirminess that I felt
yes,
getting quiet. Did that happen to you?
absolutely. Oh my goodness. Honestly, I thought we were going to die. I was literally like, this is death to me to do this. And when I work with people on this, that's exactly what they say to me. So even trying to take 20 minutes, I'm sure there's people listening today that are like, well, how do you even do that? You know, how do you manage the time? Um, and this was one thing for me. I was having an aversion to all of those things, I guess, that we're told we should be doing. Oh, get up and do, there's nothing wrong with doing a miracle morning, right? But the idea of trying to cram things in a space of time that's going to make you miraculously better in some way. And so to do that, you need to get up at 4:30 a.m. Or even some people, you know, they say get up at 3 a.m., you know, the 3 a.m. club or all of that stuff, right? And I've done all of them. I've tried, you know, I've done the cold baths. And I mean, I love doing cold baths anyway, but in an energy of this has to be done in this way. That's the way I'm going to be a successful entrepreneur. That's the next level. That's the next step. I've got the money. So I'm still chasing the money. But now I have to layer on all these biohacks and stuff, which are
Mhm.
not wrong in themselves. But it's more for me, it's the energy that we're doing it in.
Mhm.
That's the difference, right? In order to try and be better, that's what we feel like we needed to do. That was certainly a track that I was on, and a lot of people that I know were on. And so for me, I was like, I'm just rejecting all of that. I don't want to be getting up at 4:30 or 3 or whatever. And so I'm just going to put it into my day. So something has to give for it to allow me to do that. There's stuff that I'm doing that I don't need to be doing. So alcohol, obviously we talked about that. Not, I mean, I still love to watch a good Netflix show, don't get me wrong, but you know, choosing to not watch the third episode, right? And doing or going to bed on a proper time. Doing my being in the morning. So that's the first thing I do, no matter what. Still do my workout. So what I did was I looked at my schedule, I guess, and said, well, what can I take out to allow this to be there? Rather than how do I fit it in and try and tick it off the list. And
Mhm.
this is what I work with my clients on as well, is this idea that the being is the doing. Now, if you don't be and listen, and all you're doing is you're just going around in circles, you'll move stuff forward. But what you'll end up with is all these plates spinning and worrying that they're all going to come down, right? And so then what you're going to do, hire people, you'll hire people in a rush, and then you're going to whack those people in, and then it's going to be like, okay, now they're not working out next, and then you'll feel like you're a bad leader, and it all just kind of, this is usually the usual things that my clients experience. And then they get to this point where they just don't want to deal with anyone, and they're back stuck doing everything themselves, and so they don't feel like they can get out of that loop, and all of a sudden you've just built another business that was the prison that you left in your corporate job in the first place. So it feels like a never-ending cycle. So the being is the doing. Without the being, how do you know what direction you're supposed to go in
Mhm.
for alignment, which is what we all truly want anyway? And the hard thing is that for some people, it might mean, yeah, you've got to look at that issue with that person. Yes, you've got to look at the fact that maybe you don't want this impact to create this impact anymore in this business, the way that you're doing it. Maybe you have to stop drinking. Maybe you do have to change some habits, right? But to be able to grow and expand, we have to allow ourselves to let go of stuff. You can't expand if you're constrained, with stuff,
Hmm.
right? And so one thing I always say is we feel like we've got all these bags on our shoulders, but actually where the ocean, right? And the bags are on the bottom of the ocean. It's just that we feel that we're just the bags that are kind of like walking around, when we're just this expanse, and those things are just there, and we can allow them to just be there, but we don't need to pick them up. And by creating space for yourself, that's when all this awareness is able to come up, because without awareness, we can't change anything, right? It's hard to change anything because it's not, doesn't feel logical, because the change we need to make is not logical. That makes sense.
Hmm. Well, yeah, it's not something that we've done before, right? So
Right.
we don't have a template um
Mhm.
of exactly what that looks like.
Right.
And that's, I think that's the biggest difference that we're talking about here is when you get in touch with you, when you get in touch with what you know, your heart, your intuition, your true self and your unique genius, right? Like
Mm,
no one else has done exactly what you are here to do.
right.
There's
And
not
that's,
there's not
yeah,
a template.
no. And that's how amazing it is, because then we're not constrained by competition,
Hmm.
right? Because all you need to focus on is you and what you're creating and what you're building, which is then why collaboration then is so amazing, because you're not in competition with someone.
Hmm.
You're actually, you're all on the same mission. You're just doing it in a different way, and you're a unique genius. And so it takes all of that stress away as well, right? Because you're not concerned, oh, are they going to take my market share? No, you're creating your own market,
Right.
right? And you don't care about that stuff anymore. So it's freedom. I mean, it really is. I mean, you talk about expansion. Um, Expansion is freedom, and awareness is freedom. As long as you're able to look at it as that, it's not you. And this is another key point that I work with my clients on. We've had all these things, these stories of who we think we are, identities, the things that make us who we feel that we are. And the truth is, that's just stuff that's happened that you've decided to hold on to, that makes you feel that's who you are because people have told you that, you've told yourself that, it's past experiences. And you can just take all that off. It's like changing clothes, losing weight, changing clothes, get a whole new wardrobe. I mean, you can just do whatever you want from here. But we need to be aware of what those stories are, so that we're able to then decide to not pick them up anymore. And it's as simple as that. But like I said, it's not as it doesn't feel as easy as that when you're going through it, for
Hmm.
sure. But I think from what you said, and I can definitely promise that if you continue that work, you will get something on the other side of it that you won't even know is possible, never thought was possible.
Yeah, exactly. And having so for me, and I know that this is what you do with your clients as well, having someone to hold me through the squirminess, right? And through all of the feelings and through getting in touch with all of these different places inside of me that I had kept suppressed and buried
Mm,
so as not to feel them, so as to be able to keep doing what I quote unquote should be doing in
mm,
business, right? Like those were the most impactful things that I got from, I think, from my time with the coach that I'd worked with for 2 years, right? Was that she created a space for me to feel all the feelings
mm,
safely and to not look away. And so that, like, I know from personal experience and working with a lot of other people through, like, when you can look at the emotions, when you can look at the feelings, when you can be with them, and like you said, use them as data,
mm.
right? Use them as data of, okay, what is it that I'm here to look at next? That is where the big shifts come from. That is what it
Absolutely.
is. And like you said, it doesn't feel good in the moment.
No, it
Not at
feels like you
all.
want to run away. Yeah.
Yes, but to have someone like you there to hold, like to
Mm,
hold your hand, to Sherpa you through the process.
Yeah,
right? Of
absolutely.
like, you will make it through. You will make it through to the other side. You can see, because I've gone up and down the mountain so many times, and
Absolutely.
I can
Yeah.
guide you there. So,
Yeah. It's that idea of and also it can be like you just said, it can be uncomfortable, but also having someone holding you accountable to that uncomfortability. I know that was something that was really key for my growth. And so I really want to help people through that and have someone who's courageous enough for me to be able to show them that. It's like being the mirror
mhm.
for them. And it takes a lot of courage to do that and look at that. Um, but it's definitely it's so worth it because yeah, just is the trust in yourself that you are enough and it's worth going through that process for you so that you are able to be the biggest and the greatest you could ever be
Mhm.
without those limitations.
We could talk for another hour easily, for
Right, yeah.
sure. But I want to make sure that we save time for you to like, if someone is listening to this and saying, "Oh my God, that's the thing. That's what I need right now."
Mhm.
How can they get in touch with you, follow along with your journey?
Yeah.
Where are you that people can reach you?
Yeah. So I'm on all the socials as Kirsty Verity. And of course, you can email me at kirstyverity.com. And I have a specific program actually, which came from my experience of this being. And I was like, okay, so I mean, I work one-to-one with people at this at a very deep level. And I also host retreats for women as well. And but I did create a program which is essentially going through this process of being, looking, getting awareness, and then also allowing yourself to eliminate the things that no longer are serving you so that you can create space to open up creativity and vision. And so it's a 21-day journey. I called it Shift Happens because we're going to look at our shit and we're going to shift it, right? Because that's it's really that what it's about. It's looking at the stuff that we're most frightened of or we're worried about, or the doubts and the fears and the things that hold us back, the blind spots. There might be some stuff in there that you really don't know, are not aware of. And seeing, giving the space to see that. I also do a lot of guidance within those sessions to allow yourself to do that. And then also allowing yourself to look at it, let it go, and create space for more, for the next step. So you can email me about that, kirsty@kirstyverity.com. And we can talk further about how you could potentially do some shift happens.
Mm, beautiful. Thank you so much, Kirsty, for being here, for sharing your story, and just for being such a beautiful example of what you like, doing the thing that you are now like guiding people through, all the way through.
Hmm.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I
Well,
appreciate
thanks for
you.
having me. Appreciate
Yeah.
you.
Absolutely. And if anyone has any questions, as always, you can email me at Hannah, HANNAH, at expansiveceo.com. And everything that Kirsty mentioned will be listed in the show notes as well, so you can get a hold of her. We look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if anything resonated with you from this episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Hannah, HANNAH, at expansiveceo.com and tell me about it. And if you're ready for your greatest expansion, you can find ways to work with me at expansiveceo.com and at x2wealthplanning.com. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So until next time, remember that there is enough, you are enough, and your birthright in this lifetime is to be expansive.